talked about this a little just now, but we were curious about your trajectory from working for Martin, large company, and then taking the step later of going on your own. Do you see that as looking back on it now, could you have gone on your own without starting? Did the starting with Martin give you a perspective that enabled you to go out on your own, or how are those connected in your mind?
They're both very much connected. The idea that I worked for the Martin Guitar Company, I'm not going to kid myself and say that that hasn't helped along the way. I mean, it's a great pedigree. It looks good on a job resume. I mean, if you work for the Martin Guitar Company, automatically everybody thinks, okay, he must be good enough to work with my guitar. The idea of working, I mentioned it briefly earlier, was the security and the safety of working for a big corporate company was pretty nice and comfortable. The only thing about working for the big company, for me, and I didn't mention that I have a background in the visual arts. That's sort of how I started in this adorning instruments, which I loved the guitar, with artwork was sort of what drove this whole idea of doing custom inlay, and then it led to building custom guitars. But when I was working for the big company, I no longer was Tracy. I wasn't Tracy. I was just another tool bag on a bench. I was part of the corporate machine, if you will. And it didn't quite nurture your soul when you create something and you can't sign it. You can't put your name on it. And that always kind of, I don't think I realized it bothered me until I left. And then I realized, hey, wait, I have my name back. And I could do my thing. But it was a real struggle. I mean, I look back at it now and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I even pulled that. Leaving the Martin factory to just do it on my own. But it was certainly worth it, because if you're passionate about something and you really have that inner drive to try to really you can find a way. I mean, you can make it happen. And I really think that's sort of the what you should take away from my story is that I had the opportunity to work for a big corporate company, and celebrities and fancy things and NAMM shows and all the everything that goes along with working for the biggest acoustic guitar manufacturer on the planet. And then I left that to work for myself, and I was just me in my shop working by myself. And it was really scary, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I just stuck to it, and with all of the failings and all of that, I just kept doing it.
I'd like to pick up on, so you mentioned your interest in visual art as kind of being an important thing. So I'm struck by the idea that everybody on stage is involved deeply with music. So music is kind of the theme here, but Lisa, you talked about an interest in writing. You started as a writer. Eric, you talked about going with your dad to photo shoots and sort of that origin experience. Sergio, I know you're a little about your background as a student here and the performances that went along with that. So wonder if others have reflections on how those sort of earlier experiences, which may or may not have been very explicitly connected to music, sort of ultimately connect with what you're doing now. Anybody want to chime in on that?
I'll go. It was interesting because I grew up mostly in the late 70s and 80s, and this was when MTV was kind of coming on, and listening to the radio, and so you were exposed to music as kids, even back then with three guys, channels 3. Can you imagine this? It was great, but when I was old enough to start going with my father to a recording session, right? And he lived in Richmond, Virginia, which was, I grew up in Roanoke, so Richmond was like the big city where, there were, cosmopolitan people doing cosmopolitan things. And I went into a recording session, and there were some really top-tier musicians playing, and I think I was in my early teens, but I was just like, this is a different level. These are artists, and these are people that, and it sort of made me question, because I liked music, I had been playing music, and it sort of made me think, like, that could be a really cool career path for me, because that's awesome. You know, these guys are playing all sorts of different kinds of music, and like that instrument, I think I could do that. And I started, you know, playing guitar. I still play to this day. I was telling these guys I'm terrible, but I love it. But the exposure to music really helped kind of define my career path, because I knew that you know, it was sort of a big deal, you know, seeing these people that were doing it professionally, that was accessible to me. You know, it wasn't the people on MTV, it wasn't the people on the radio. It was people that I'm sitting as close as I am to you, and they were just killing it. And it blew my mind, but it also brought it down to a level where I knew it was achievable, you know, if I wanted to do it. And if I didn't want to do it, I knew I wanted to be around it, because I knew how powerful and important it was.
Lisa, you talked about your aspirations to be a writer, and you said something like found out you weren't quite good enough. But I'm assuming that, or you can tell us, does that interest, that passion that you had for writing, connect with your passion for marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that writing has always given me, and maybe where my drive to write came from, is that I have a tremendous respect for words and the power of words and the power of language. And I have a little bit of kind of a real fangirl swoony thing for beautifully written copy, whether that is fiction or nonfiction. You know, even a matter of someone like Aaron Sorkin, who's a screenwriter. I am madly in love with his writing, whether I agree with anything his characters say, because there is this beautiful cadence to it. And I think that if you've ever had someone say something to you that hurt your feelings or made your heart swell with love, you understand what that power is. So being able to name it and dissect it and use it on behalf of what I do in my day-to-day life is really important for me, for kind of self-actualization of who I am as a professional, because I want to move people, even if I'm talking about like the head on a timpani, or, you know, a school music program, or a scholarship opportunity for music educators, because you could do it in a mundane way, or you could do it in a sublime way. And we're always reaching for the sublime. And I think that's what keeps you energized in the morning, no matter what you choose to do with your career in music business or any business.
Sergio, can you talk a little about how things that you do in your job right now connect to sort of core passions or things that motivated you for a long time ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just being a musician and, you know, coming to school here and studying music, it helps me every day in my job. Whether it's reading an email from someone in a drum corps somewhere that broke something on a drum, you know, and like being able to understand immediately why or how that happened, because I have that experience with all those different kinds of products and different kinds of drums. It's just like second nature to me. I know it, you know, right off the bat. Same thing with like product development. Since I've been so in touch with the instruments and the products for so many years, I know what would make someone's life easier by solving problems. And speaking with all these different kinds of artists, when they're talking about, oh, I set up my drum this way or that way, I can intuitively understand what they're talking about. So it helps me immediately.
That word, that famous word, someone's been in the room a few times, someone. And Eric, looking at your portfolio, you are certainly someone who has a lot of someones out there, clients, a whole range of very different clients working with people. And I admit to being really, really jealous. You know, I'm a marketer myself. And this man works for Mercedes, chocolate spread, Nutella, and music. I mean, isn't that the perfect combination? I mean, that's amazing. Anyway, so you do, and how do you work with all these people? Is that a blessing? Is that a curse to work with all these people? And the second part of my question, is it also possible to influence a little the composition of the people you work with? I mean, you are your own boss. Can you say, oh, I'd love to work with musicians, that must be fun, and then, I mean, assuming it's fun working with musicians.
Working with musicians is great. And yeah, I think Well, first of all, it's nice working on all sorts of different stuff. If I didn't mention it before, I'm a dabbler. But I think it's kind of just ADD, that I'm trying to make a living out of, honestly. But I do like doing marketing across the industries. There's a lot of creative people that are just car guys or just packaged goods people or whatever. I like the spectrum. In terms of working with who you want to work with, that's a life question. That's that's hard. If you can make that happen, that's a key, because if you work in the corporate world, you have a lot less say-so over who you work with. You can choose your company, and hopefully you choose well, and you're working with good people that all are part of a team. I actually worked for big agencies for a long time in New York City, and recently last year I went out on my own, and one of the main reasons I did was because I think I'm right so far. I knew enough to be able to do it on my own, first of all. But second of all, I wanted to have more of a choice over who I wanted to work with. I had been lucky not to have very many bad clients. I can't really recount any stories where I've worked with any, outright like evil people or, bad stories that you've heard of, knock on wood. But so first of all, I wanted to be able to choose some of the clients I wanted to work with. But secondly, I wanted to be able to work with the vendors I want to work with. And to that point, I want to work with the guys that make music that I like working with. Always open to new people, but when you work in a bigger place and you work with a bigger team, unless you're the boss, boss, you don't really always get to choose every little bit. And that was a big reason I went out on my own, was to be able to make those kind of choices. And I think it makes you happier when you work with people who make you happy.
You still have chocolate spread, though.
And chocolate spread does not hurt.
Chocolate spread, it always helps. But spectrum of people we work with, I think it was an interesting keyword here. I don't know, Sergio, some observations. The different people you interact with, the spectrum of people you interact with, the clients, the customers, the peers.
Yeah, I interact with a ton of different people from all around the world. Didario is a global company, and we have affiliates and distribution centers everywhere. I mean, Didario's got distribution in 120 countries, and me being at the headquarters, I get questions from everywhere, and everyone always needs something. So, and these things come in all time of the day. I can wake up on a Saturday morning and there's tons of emails coming in from someone in Japan or Australia, and you learn a lot from all these different regions of the world where they all have their own different kinds of problems. Sometimes it's price issues, sometimes it's a certain kind of music there, and they want a new product that can be developed to be used in that region, and we definitely do that kind of stuff and respond to it because there's business potential there.
So people from all over the place. Thanks for that keyword, Tracy. I imagine that's something you can connect with. I mean, I reckon the market for for inlay artist work in Ogdensburg is rather limited. You probably have people from elsewhere. How they find you? How do you find them? How do you connect with people?
I don't do a lot more than the basic trade show from time to time, the website, which I'm embarrassed to say hasn't been updated in a very long time. But people just find me. I'm in a unique situation where I'll get phone calls and people interested. I heard about you from so and so, and I saw so and so play one of your guitars, and now I really want one of my own. And so my business is kind of developed based on reputation of my product, which I'm extremely proud of. And I was talking about this earlier, that I feel like every guitar I build should be an amazing instrument. And if I do inlay work and fancy inlay art all over these things, mother of pearl and exotic stuff all over them, and I think that's fine, except if it doesn't sound like an amazing instrument, it doesn't matter how beautiful it is. So my instruments are sort of my business card, if you will, and that's how I sort of drive my business. And word of mouth, people play the guitars, and because you can ship them all over, the internet is an amazing thing, of course. So I don't really have any sort of direct perspective on how I approach finding business. I guess it just sort of, like I said, the guitars just sort of speak for themselves, and then people just find me.
The aficionados kind of find you, and first I thought this may be quite different in a way, Yamaha, I mean, but then on the other side, looking at it, possibly it's not all that different. I mean, you may have other additional issues there, at least thinking of marketing across cultures, communicating with people in Tokyo in their headquarters. Any thoughts on the people you interact with?
I think that we live in such an increasingly globalized world that in a company like Yamaha, we certainly have our discrete markets. You know, I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which means we cover the United States. And there's a Yamaha Canada, and there's a Yamaha Latin America, and there's a Yamaha de Mexico. But the reality is that our customers don't think of themselves that way. They're inspired by video they see of, mariachi performers in another country, and they are downloading music from someone who's writing in Germany, and they are taking virtual classes with someone who's in Australia. And we are trying very hard to let the customer be the common language that we speak, to let them be kind of our true north of how we frame every decision that we make. And when we do that, it makes it really easy to, well, it makes it easier to, it's never really easy, but it makes it easier to remove the territoriality, to stop worrying about where my line ends and Eric's begins. And it's been a really wonderful experience for us to develop that customer obsession and that customer language.
Thank you. Exciting commonalities here, actually.
Thank you. Sergio, you're in a somewhat unique position to speak to our students who are here, because you were once sort of where they were, and to continue thinking about the trajectory of careers, as you reflect back to your time as a student here at Crane, would you say that you were at that point sort of mapping things out? You kind of knew where you were going to go, or you had to get out there and find what was out there, or some combination of those things?
It's a good question, and I think when I was here, I did not actually plan to go into business. I was a music education major, and I used a business minor as sort of backup. It's like, well, I should probably study this just in case teaching or maybe performing doesn't work out.
It's sort of the flip side of the usual backup.
Yeah. And it's like maybe I can get a steady job doing something in the business world. So my focus here was music education, and I was kind of speaking about this a little bit earlier to the percussion studio. But when I graduated here, it was at a time when the economy wasn't in such a good place. It was 2010, and it was very difficult to find a job, and most of my peers were going back to school, getting a master's, just because they couldn't find a place to work. Many music programs were getting cut in schools. Art programs, they were the first things to go. And I did the internship with the NAMM show, and I did it with Latin percussion. And a year later, after I had graduated, a job opened up there, and nothing was working out for me with teaching, so it was just like, good timing, good luck for me. I applied for the position with JP's connection there, and it really helped out, and I got the gig, and now here we are 8 years later, and I don't even teach private lessons. It's crazy how these things like totally flipped over, but I don't get summers off either, so that's no fun.
Do any of the others have a sort of a story about how a backup plan turned into an opportunity, or something unexpected came along that led to a path you wouldn't have thought of earlier? Anybody?
I actually I'm kind of the only person I know in my realm that knew exactly what he wanted to do from like a really early age. So I think I'm kind of lucky in that respect. I did lay tile for a year. I took a year off of college. And actually, that made me realize that I didn't want to lay tile. So that was helpful.
I mean, maybe that's an aspect of the failure question earlier. Sometimes we find out by doing something what we really don't want to do, and that informs us about the thing that we really should do.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yes. So,
Right.
anyone
So,
else?
being mindful that we want to also open up to the floor at one point, what I propose we do is the next thing, just with kind of this round now, we do as a quick fire round to just for whoever feels like they are the lucky person, kind of to pick it up and answer it for us. The first one is the white elephant in the room. When is it time to readjust your career? To think about your career? How do you know it's time to think about your career, to change career? The white elephant.
I'll go ahead and jump in. There came a time in my career when I actually was talking to a group of interns, and I was explaining to them my job, and they were not marketing interns; they were from another part of the company. And as I told them the story, this line popped out of me, which was that I've never woken up and had one of those like, mornings where you just don't want to get out of bed because you don't want to go to work. And that was kind of like a light bulb that went on for me, because I had worked plenty of jobs where you have those mornings, and every day it's not that you're tired, it's that you to your core don't want to get up and do that job, laying tile. I'm guessing that Eric probably had a couple of those mornings in that year that he took off.
Every morning.
Every morning. And so you will always have days where the job is not fun. You will always have days where the politics get in the way. You will always have days where someone is being a pill. But when the I don't want to go to work starts to become a pattern is when I know I need to do something. I need to introduce change into my life. And I'm really grateful that over time I have figured out what that formula is for me. And I don't have those days. And don't plan on laying tile, so hopefully I won't have any of those days from here on out. But when that little voice inside you tells you, like, I hate this, like, I really hate this, please don't do what my son does and just quit. He's had a couple of those fast food moments. But, it's time to get strategic about what it is you don't like and then go out and find the thing you do.
Not being willing to get up for class does not qualify, by the way.
Does not qualify at all. I have no sympathy.
But to your point, Lisa, I mean, I think all of us on stage are very fortunate to be able to marry passion with work life. And if you can do something you love, then you technically don't have to work a day, right? It's because you love doing it.
Here's another one. Sergio, you sort of talked about this. We're talking about the first job and what you took from it, for good, for bad, how it launched you. So you talked about your job with LP and kind of how that got you on your trajectory. Does anyone else want to talk about your very first professional job and where that led you or what it taught you?
Like in professional, like out of college job. Because I was Chuck E. Cheese before.
Okay.
I
Laying
was,
tile, Chuck E. Cheese.
That was way better than laying tile, being Chuck E. Cheese. I had to wear the rat costume and dance.
And so what did you take from that?
Actually, it was, I've actually worked a lot of jobs, but from that job, it was interesting because I had two clients in that job. I had the kids who were the birthday parties that would come in, and I'd have to, here's Chucky, and I'd come out and do. And so I had to please the kids, but I also had to please the parents were there, and this was the most lucrative job I had before I got out of college and got a professional job, because if you handled these groups of 30 kids, the parents would give you like $100 tip, and this was in like the mid to late 80s when $100 was like $1 million, and it was just, but it was interesting because even though I was in high school and had a lot of other stuff going on. I remember that, when you actually learn a life lesson, there's that aha moment where the sky's open. You're like, oh, this is a life moment right now. I remember thinking like, I did the math, and I'm like, I got this. And then I went to college. God, that was literally, I was like, I kind of didn't want to leave that job because it was a lot of money, but yeah, it was helpful.
obviously we can prepare questions, not answers. So the next question comes kind of a slightly funny moment to ask now about skills that college did not teach you. And I'm not looking at any kind of birthday parties for kids here. But anything you wish kind of going to music business program or any other program college would have prepared you for, or skills you wish you had. I mean, of course, Crane is different.
I know everything. Thank you, Crane.
Thank you.
I would say that for me, the fact that I was so in tune with the, no pun intended, with the guitar when I first started, I was a guitar player from a much younger age and background in visual arts from a young age. I mean, I also felt like I always knew what I wanted to do. And so the understanding of the guitar and being curious, like how does it work? Why does it do what it does? And why and how and those sorts of questions sort of made me sort of dig in a little deeper. And then as you start dissecting those things that I was already familiar with, then you start to develop an understanding of, okay, well, if I can understand how it comes apart, I can probably put it back together. And and so I don't know. I think anything that you're passionate about, and just briefly to mention about the jobs that I didn't work for Chuck E. Cheese, but a lot of those jobs that you do, even though if you have this passion driving you toward, you want to do this one particular thing. This is your career. This is your end game, and this is where you want to be. I always looked at those jobs because I've had my share of those as well, as sort of a means to an end. This is what I'm going to do right now, which is going to eventually get me to where I want to be. And I think that's the sort of thing that keeps you happy in the fact that you're laying tile or babysitting 30 children. So, but yeah, I think anything that you're familiar with can really lend itself to helping to develop what you do.
So I think it's fair to say each of you came at your careers through a different kind of path, not only in career path in terms of jobs, but education that you had that kind of led that way. But as a educational institution with a music business program, we're kind of interested in asking this. If you could reflect a little bit on what do you think a music business program can teach its students, and then what is really up to the student that we can maybe aspire to, but it really is the students who are going to make it happen or not. So what can we do, and what do they have to do? Any ideas on that?
Well, I'll say first of all that and I'm not even saying this because I'm here, but I would almost always rather work with somebody who has a passion for music or can play music, because I think that people who are good at music they tend to be smarter people, honestly. And you guys can thank me after this. But seriously, I mean, I think that and you were talking about earlier, like, when you guys have to fail, you fail on stage and fail, you go up in huge balls of flames. And I think, there's a lot of stuff that you guys have to go through to learn music, and especially at this level, that sort of prepares you for things that in life and in business that other people aren't prepared for. It's like you know a second language, essentially, and you have the performance. You have a discipline, almost like a military kind of discipline. There's so much that comes with it, that I've seen it throughout my career where I'll literally be in a room and I'll kind of be able to point out the person who is a musician, and that's a good quality.
I will say what you're saying sort of resonates with things that I have heard from some employers of our graduates, and I'm sort of half remembering this. Somebody at Daddario may have said this to me quite a while ago, but that one of the things they liked about our graduates is that they are grounded in music, that they can be taught all kinds of things about the company, but because they speak the language of music and know how to work with musicians and collaborate with them, that's worth a lot more than if they could tick off a number of skills or content areas that they might know.
It certainly makes things a lot easier, and in the creative sense, like for marketing, I work with a whole bunch of different graphic designers and copywriters, art directors, creative directors, and some of them are not musicians. And sometimes they come up with language or an ad that, to me as a musician, when I look at it, doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really connect the dots in the way I think it should, you know. And of course, there's a million different ways to do one thing, but if you can speak the language, the music language, and understand the subtle nuances that musicians, the way they speak to each other, it helps immensely.
Wouldn't believe how many photo shoots I've seen where the saxophone has the mouthpiece the wrong way up, you know. That type of thing. So, last question before we open to the floor. Can I ask two assistants to please be so kind and come to the first row, so they'll pick up our roving microphones in a moment, whilst we are considering here kind of a magic bowl moment. So looking fast forwarding to kind of in 10 years time, what does your magic bowl tell you about music, the creative industries at large? What do you think are skills we will need to have, or we will need more in the future?
I'll go first. So I kind of spoke about this one a little bit earlier as well, but definitely embrace technology. And I know sometimes it can be a little difficult when you're sitting in a practice room with your acoustic instrument, but think outside the box and find ways that you can incorporate technology into your life. There are things that I wish that I'd spent more time on in my past that I kind of suck at today, and I always have to go to other people for help. You know, simply like recording or even photo editing, little things like that that I just cannot do. And if you can pick up that stuff in your spare time, it'll help you.
Well, that was a nice crystal bowl. Now I think it's time for Dean Sitten and myself to pass on the microphones, so that kind of the house can then kind of go and ask questions. So please be noisy, ask questions. Not. Yep. Okay. This is complex multitasking. Okay, so we have two microphones, Elizabeth and Alexa. Just give a clear show of hands, otherwise they can't see properly. Thank you.
All right, this is a question for Tracy. So as an artist and someone who manufactures guitars, how do you find the balance between creating something that you love and also giving what the artist is looking for?
Well, there's a couple of things I can speak to about that. One of the things is I'm grateful I'm married, and my wife will often kind of whack me and say, look, stop. So I have a tendency just to get a little overboard. But I think, you know, back to the basic sort of business principles and such, the customer is always right kind of thing. So I've done lots of custom inlay where somebody has asked me to do something or build a guitar in a certain way using certain woods, and I cringe a little bit. But I always go to the place where they get what they want. And so, yeah, I do a lot of spec type instruments where I'll just build something because I want to build something, and I'll appoint it the way I want to appoint it. And then if somebody wants to buy it, fine. If not, I don't mind. But yeah, no, the customer kind of is always right, and that's really what drives the sort of the direction of the guitar build process or the inlay appointment process. And unfortunately, not a lot of people have great creative ideas. But with an art background, part of the what I can do is you can give me your ideas, and then I can turn them into drawings and figure out where we can appoint these on the instrument, and then turn them back to you, and you can say, well, I like this, but I want to change this, and so on. So we can do this interactive thing where I can kind of steer you a little bit if you're not really, you know, it's not looking like it's going to be really that great. If that helps.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Jerry Barber, and I wanted to know, going back to college, what class did you wish you had taken to help you further your careers now?
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. Maybe I could have finished college. That would have. So yeah, I would have probably finished. That would have helped me, I'm sure, tremendously. And I would have to say, my wife often gets after me to to go back to school and do something like the music business program, to do something where the business part of what I do, I mean, because I'm building with passion, and I'm building what I want to build, and I'm just building instruments and doing custom appointments and such, and then just the repairs. So I'm like in the trenches, just kind of doing the work. As far as the business part of it, I think all of the basics and fundamentals of the business program would have truly been a blessing to me.
Business, hands down. Seriously, if you're at all, in a creative zone, what you're going to find is you're going to get out there, and there's going to be people who are really good at business that you're going to have to rely on to do the businessy sort of stuff. Now, they might be good people, and they might not be such good people, but it's always better if you know those ropes. And business is hard, especially, if you're more of a, right brain, did we decide? What is the creative side, right? Okay. If you're more right brained, you tend to not, be sort of algorithmic in business, but, force yourself to do it early. Get used to it, get used to the nomenclature, read the book, you obviously get straight A's in this program, but even do more, watch videos, learn outside, because these are things that, the sooner you get used to dealing with that stuff, the more sort of natural it's going to be, and you're going to thank yourself.
Hello. Oh, that's loud. So this is a question for everyone. As a group of dabblers, at certain points in your career, did you find that you had to give up dabbling in certain things to make room for the one or two things that you really wanted to do with your career? And if so, how did you reconcile or deal with those sacrifices?
I've got something I can say about that, and I often say this when I'm in the shop and people come in. When I first started doing custom guitar repairs and custom building and inlaying and the stuff that I do, I didn't want to disappoint anybody. So if somebody came in and they said, "Well, can you fix my accordion?" I'd be like, "I'll try," and and it got to the point where I had to start to realize it's okay to be good at some things, and it's also okay to not be good at some things. And it took me a long time to realize, I'm probably not that good at that. So I'll tell people I'd be glad to look at it. I can't promise I'll be able to fix something. So the idea of understanding what you can do and what you can't do, and just the ability to be able to say that out loud, that was a really wonderful thing for me.
Thank you.
I would just say in terms of that, yes, all the time. I think that kind of, if you choose to take a career path that involves increasing levels of responsibility and kind of moving your way up the org chart, the reward for being really good at your job is that you have to give up the things that you really love to do other stuff. It's kind of this terrible, sick trick that the business world plays on you. You spend a lot more time defending other people's right to do the things that you love and making sure that they have a safe and a productive environment. For me, a certain amount of it is absolutely in mentorship and in taking the things that I love and teaching it to someone else and making them really good at it. And when I think back about all the things I'm really proud of doing in my career, it's the people I grew that matter so much more to me than the projects I did personally. So that's how I kind of have to get that fix. And then, you know what? This is a gig economy. I have side hustles like everybody else. So I also take those odd freelance gigs when I have like an itch that really needs to be scratched.
Thank you so much.
Hey, my name is Steven. My question actually jumps off Jerry's. So she asked, what was maybe a class that you wish you had taken? And this doesn't necessarily have to apply to a class, but what was your most valuable college experience?
I think I have a pretty good one. It actually involves music. Okay, so I played guitar from an early age, and I was pretty good. I'm still pretty good, but I went to college and I took a year off to lay tile, and I came back and I was kind of entering my 5th and a half year, and in college was great until all of a sudden I was like, I got to get out of here. Like, what am I doing? This is going on 5 years, and it turned out that I needed a couple of odd extra credits to graduate, and one of those credits could be fulfilled by taking a rock guitar class, and it was just some 101 class that I guess I'd missed the first year, and I'm like, oh man, I got this, right? So, and it was a class that was like at 7 at night, and so I go and I take my little amp and my guitar and I go, and I went for a couple classes, but the first assignment was to learn the solo from Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love, and I knew that solo. I used to play that solo in my band, and I rocked that solo. And so I come into the class, and it was probably like 10 people, and I'd go around the room, and there were people in there that had never touched a guitar before in their life. And it was sort of like guitarioke, like it was the backing band and no guitar solos. You had to play the guitar solo. And it comes around to me, and I hit my pedal, like I was the only one with a pedal. And I hit a pedal, and I blew everybody away, and I was so psyched about this. And I look over at the teacher, and he just was like, "All right, pretty good." And everybody, my other classmates were pretty impressed. And then went through the class, and it was a fairly short class. It was like a summer class, I think. And then I got a C in the class, and I remember going to talk to the professor, and I was like, "Dude, what? I cannot believe this! Like, I rocked this." And he was like, "Let me tell you a little something about managing expectations." And he had a little discussion with me about life, and he was just like, "You really should never have played that solo like that, because I know what you were capable of, and then for the next 7 classes, you phoned it in." And I didn't say anything to you at the time because I wanted to see what you would do if you would keep it at that level, but you didn't. And of course, I was like, 20 and lazy. But that just really stuck with me. I was just like, wow, that was pretty cool. And I am still embarrassed about that, by the way. But I did rock it, just saying. It's good.
Hi, my question's about networking. Students are often really uncomfortable with the idea of networking or asking for an informational interview. Do you have any personal experience, anyone with your own evolution in your thinking about how you approach networking and its value to you, or becoming more comfortable with that as a means to getting a job?
I think networking is hugely important. If it wasn't for me networking and meeting people, I would not be where I am today. Going to the NAM program that the school has here and going out to California and working for a large company, I met a ton of people out there, and they remembered me. I made impressions. A year later, I was able to work at that company. 12 months had gone by, and these people still remember who I was, and they interact with thousands of people in a year. So having strong personal and people skills is hugely important, and making connections, making impacts with people, it's priceless.
I think too that one of the reasons why networking is so hard is because very frequently when we go into it with an agenda. I'm trying to reach out to you and I'm trying to meet you because I need something from you and I'm about to ask you for a favor. And I think that that's, an unfortunate and mercenary way to approach networking. The great thing about the NAM interns, and we've had several NAM interns that we have fallen in love with, is they come out and they meet us, but they're in the middle of doing something for us. They're doing us a favor. They come out and work like dogs all weekend at NAM, which is a very difficult thing to do. And we get a chance to see who they are as people, and we get a chance to have genuine conversations with them, and they ask us about our lives and our spouses and our kids, and they make a genuine human connection. And I think that when you look at someone and you say, like, I just want to get to know who you are, I just want to have like a moment with you, networking becomes a lot less painful because you don't have that voice in the back of your head that's like, all right, how do I butter this guy up so that when I ask him for a job reference, he'll say yes. And that will come later. It will absolutely come later, but you need to put a little bit of sincerity into it beforehand, and the sincerity is what takes the sting out.
Just to very quickly say, I think we have time for another 2, perhaps even 3 questions, and then bear in mind we have networking after, coming up with exciting chocolate. No, sorry, that's not biscuits. I've been excited all week.
Okay. Hi, my name is Adara. This is a question for Lisa. What difficulties or challenges have you found as a woman holding a higher position in the music business?
That is a great question. It's a little bit lonely. You know what? I will say that I don't think that there is any inherent sexism in the music industry. I don't think that there is any barrier to a woman being successful. I think that it is my personal perspective that it has possibly been a male-dominated industry for a little bit, but that it's a wonderful time to be a woman, that every meeting I go into, there are more women with each passing month. There are wonderful support groups like Smart Women in Music who are doing things to do positive mentoring. I think the most important thing that maybe women of my generation had to learn is that there's room for all of us at the table. You know, there's not like the one token woman seat, and if I get it, you don't get it. We can all lift each other up. And I'm so blessed. You guys can tell I'm big on gratitude. I'm so blessed that I have met so many smart, ambitious, generous women in the music industry who are really happy to help a sister out. And I think it's a great time for you to be the sum of who you are and not the sum of your gender. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Hi, my name is Isaac. There are many schools with high needs and schools with a limited budget. I was just wondering how you convince the superintendents, the principals, the teachers that not only music is important, but at the same time while like pitching them your product.
They're not the same conversation at all. We're really involved in advocacy. I know that Diodario is as well. I won't put words in Sergio's mouth, but we firmly believe that music makes life better, and we firmly believe that music makes you a better human being. And we're happy to have that argument all day long with politicians and lobbyists and to proclaim that message far and wide. If we have to choose between a school having a healthy program and a school buying our product, not buying our product, we want you to have a healthy program, because that's the future of everything that we do. It's the future of not only our company, but every industry that depends on it. And so it's always about the need for music first.
So perhaps one more question?
I just want to add to something that Lisa said. Those are 2 totally separate conversations. Working with a school that doesn't have a budget, it's impossible to sell them something because they have no money. And in those situations, it's typically a donation that we'd make to force music in that school, to make sure that it's happening there. And then hopefully in the future, that the program will grow, then maybe they'll become our customer. But, the idea is really just to have music program there for it to grow in that space.
Hi, I have a question for Eric. When did you feel like you could choose the people you worked with, and at what point in your career did you find that sustainable, or did you feel like you always had that freedom?
In the sort of the advertising and marketing realm, it's probably the same with any other realm, but like I think you have to get good enough to be able to make those demands. You know what I mean? Like you have to be trusted. I think that in a corporate environment, you at a certain point, when you get up into management, you can hire the people that you want. When you're making commercials, for instance, for TV, you get to choose your production company, you get to choose your director, you get to choose your editor, you get to choose your music, blah blah blah. And the more you're trusted, the more you get to make those kinds of choices. One of the reasons I went out on my own was that I felt like I had learned enough to be able to choose the other parts of who I work with, which is my clients, you know what I mean? And as well as, some other people, because even in the corporate world, and you are trusted and you can choose a lot, a lot of times they're just like, yeah, but we want you to use company X because that's my brother's company, or there's stuff like that you can't get around. But it just really comes down to just being really good at what you do. And to your point, it's like, if you're really good at what you do, people will, in your case, find you, and then they'll trust you, and you can do what you want to do more.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
That's a nice word. It's very simple. Just be really good at what you do. It's very easy. Now, I would love for us all to do a little exercise in backwards planning, which I do in several of my classes. Some of them students will think, oh, not again. So we start with the final thing, which will be all these lovely people outside and us eating chocolate, biscuits, time and networking and talking and continuing the conversation. Before we do that, we will do a photo with all music business students on stage, and of course the lovely panel. But before we do that, it's my pleasant task to perhaps add 2-3 very warm and very heartfelt thank yous for today. The first goes, of course, to Professor Jim Peterson for helping us, making it such a great day. And the second thank you goes to all the people here who've worked behind the scenes, from Douglas and the sound team and Tom Grabowski here. We are guests in this wonderful Performing Arts Center. And of course to the team in music business, Jen, Alexa, Kelly, Elizabeth, Sabrina and Paul. Please a round of applause for these guys. And now that we've practiced, can we have a proper round of applause for these 4 fantastic guests? Great, so all music business students, please join us on stage for a photo.
Kelly's a photo. He wants to go outside to get it ready to interview.